She said I ruined her aesthetic. But what I did next, nobody saw coming. The quiet of the suburban street shattered with the sound of metal against wood. A hammer slammed down, one strike after another, planting a sign into the earth with unshakable determination. Red letters screamed into the morning light. Asterisk asterisk for sale. Asterisk asterisk. Neighbors froze. Curtains twitched. A man who had once been the picture of quiet sacrifice now stood tall on his front lawn, every swing of the hammer echoing years of swallowed pride. His daughter, barefoot on the porch, screamed in disbelief. "Dad, stop! You're embarrassing me." Her voice cracked, but he didn't flinch. Not once. Phone shot up instantly, tiny glowing rectangles capturing the clash of two worlds. Some neighbors whispered, "Is this real? Did he just put her house on the market?" Others smirked knowingly. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't just a father selling property. This was justice, loud and public, written in block letters for everyone to see. The daughter, once the princess of this perfect two-story home, was suddenly powerless. She had mocked him, dismissed his taste, laughed at his efforts to make her dream come true. She had told him he ruined her aesthetic. But now the aesthetic was being ripped away, piece by piece, in front of an audience that was eating up every second. The father tightened his grip on the hammer. His silence said more than any insult could. His shoulders squared. His eyes burned with the resolve of a man who had given everything and finally reached the breaking point. Every swing was a declaration. "I built this. I sacrificed for this. And if you can't respect it, you don't deserve it." Gasps rippled across the street as the sign finally stood firm, planted like a flag of rebellion. His daughter covered her face, but the cameras caught it all, her tears, her outrage, her humiliation. The whispers turned into murmurs. The murmurs into gossip that would soon explode online. Because this wasn't just a family fight. It was a generational battle, a clash between gratitude and entitlement, dignity and vanity. And the world had just been invited to witness round one. But how did things get so bad that a dream home turned into a war zone? The truth begins long before the sign went up. It hadn't always been this way. When the house first became theirs, it was more than just walls and windows. It was proof that sacrifice could turn into something real. The father had worked 2 jobs for years, coming home with hands blistered, shoulders aching, and eyes half shut from exhaustion. He skipped vacations, wore the same pair of shoes until the sawless gave out, and cut corners on everything for himself. Every dollar he saved carried one vision, a place where his daughter would never feel the insecurity he grew up with. The day he brought her to see it for the first time, her face lit up. She ran through the empty halls, opening closet doors, spinning in circles in the living room. "It's perfect, Dad," she whispered, hugging him tight. For him, that moment was worth every sacrifice. He thought he'd given her more than a home. He believed he'd given her a piece of stability, a future carved out of struggle and love. But perfection has a short lifespan in a world where appearances rule. Soon, complaints began to creep in. First it was the kitchen. "Dad, the cabinets are outdated. It doesn't match the vibe." Then the living room. "This carpet ruins everything. I can't even take pictures in here." By the time she got to the exterior paint, her words carried a sharper edge. "You really don't get it, do you? This isn't my aesthetic." Each remark cut deeper than she realized. She wasn't just criticizing color schemes or furniture. She was dismantling the very thing he had bled for. To her, the house was content, a backdrop for selfies and videos that would vanish in 24 hours. To him, it was a monument to years of grit and hope. The generational divide grew wider with every conversation. Gratitude had been his compass, the fuel that kept him working when his body screamed to stop. For her, validation from strangers online seemed to matter more than the foundation beneath her feet. He couldn't understand how likes on a post outweighed a roof that sheltered her. She couldn't understand how chipped cabinets or mismatched tiles didn't bother him. The tension simmered in silence until it boiled over in front of others. She mocked him, sometimes with a laugh, sometimes with a roll of the eyes. "You just don't get it," she'd say, as though his decades of sacrifice meant nothing compared to an algorithm. And he, holding his tongue, felt the sting of disrespect no parent ever wants to face. The realization that love had been mistaken for failure. Neighbors began to notice. Friends overheard. The whispers about her ungratefulness started circling long before the sign ever appeared. The father became the tragic figure in hushed conversations, the man who gave everything only to be told it wasn't enough. And yet, the breaking point hadn't arrived. Not yet. For that, the world needed to see the other side of the story. The daughter behind the Instagram perfect smile. The one who cared more about filters than family. More about image than integrity. But to understand the full weight of this betrayal, you need to see who the daughter really is behind the Instagram perfect smile. From the outside, she looked like a rising star. Her social media feed was flawless. Pastel filters, carefully staged coffee cups, mirror selfies and curated outfits. To her thousands of followers, she was the embodiment of effortless style, the girl who always had it together. Every post carried the caption of someone who seemed to be living a charmed life. And yet, behind the glossy veneer, a different truth was brewing, one her father knew all too well. Her obsession with appearances had no ceiling. If the couch was too bulky for her photos, she sneered, "This looks like something from a thrift store." If the curtains weren't light enough for her aesthetic, she demanded replacements. Even the plates he had picked out with pride, saving months just to buy something sturdy, became a target. "Dad, no one uses plates like these anymore. They're ugly. They ruin my whole vibe." At first, he laughed it off, thinking it was youthful restlessness. But the laughter dried up when her tone shifted from playful to cutting. She didn't just dislike his choices, she mocked them. "Of course you'd think this looks good," she said once, gesturing at the dining table he'd refinished by hand. "You have no taste. You're stuck in the past." The words stung, not because of the table, but because they dismissed the hours he spent sanding, staining, and pouring his heart into something for her. Online, she painted a different picture. She posed in the very house she belittled, cropping out the parts she didn't approve of, showcasing only what fit her aesthetic narrative. Followers adored it. Comments flooded in. "Your home is perfect. Dream house goals. Obsessed with your vibe." Every like was a shot of validation that made her more addicted to the illusion. But behind the lens, she rolled her eyes, muttering complaints about how the paint clashed with her outfit or how the flooring didn't look good on camera. Her arrogance grew in proportion to her following. The more praise she collected online, the harsher she became in real life. She treated her father less like the man who had built her future and more like an obstacle to be managed. Every suggestion he made was brushed aside. Every attempt at bonding was twisted into a critique. She didn't just disagree, she ridiculed. Once, he suggested inviting family over for dinner, proud to finally host in the home he'd bought. She smirked. "Dad, no one wants to eat in a house that looks like this. It's embarrassing." She said it with the casual cruelty of someone who knew her words would cut deep and then moved on, as if it hadn't mattered. The neighbors saw the divide. They noticed how she strutted past him with headphones on, eyes glued to her phone, while he lingered at the door hoping for a word of connection. They saw her car in the driveway, sleek and polished, parked beside his old beat-up truck, the very vehicle that carried him through endless double shifts so she could have the life she flaunted. Her online life was a highlight reel, curated perfection, but her real life was riddled with selfishness, entitlement, and a growing contempt for the very man who had made her dreams possible. And the cruelest part? She knew how much the house meant to him. She knew it was more than a structure, it was the culmination of years of sweat, of sacrifice, of unspoken promises. And yet she weaponized that knowledge, using it to twist the knife deeper every time she mocked him. To her followers, she was inspiring. To him, she had become unrecognizable. But every great conflict has two sides, and this father's journey reveals why this house meant more than walls and paint. It was his legacy. He hadn't been handed much in life. Born in a cramped apartment where the walls were thin and opportunities thinner, he learned early that survival required grit. His father worked with his hands. His mother stretched every coin until it tore. And still there were nights when dinner was nothing more than rice and silence. From those beginnings, he carried one truth. If he wanted a better life for his child, he'd have to carve it out of stone with his own hands. So he worked long hours at a factory where the machines roared so loud they rattled his bones. Night shifts as a janitor, pushing brooms across empty hallways while the world slept. Overtime whenever it was offered, no matter how tired he was. Because overtime meant one more bill paid, one more step toward a dream he clung to like oxygen. There were no vacations, No frivolous purchases. No indulgences. Every dollar saved was a brick in the invisible foundation he was building for his daughter's future. When she was little, she never noticed the exhaustion etched into his face. She only knew that her father was there, tucking her in, whispering stories about how one day she'd have a room of her own, painted any color she wanted. To her, they were bedtime tales. To him, they were a vow. The house became the symbol of that vow. It wasn't just real estate, it was dignity. It was proof that his sacrifices hadn't been in vain, that his long nights and aching back had built something permanent. Stability, something he had never known, now stood in bricks and mortar. Love, something he poured into every decision, echoed in the sound of a key turning in a lock he could finally call his own. When he signed the papers, his hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of generations behind him. He thought of his parents who never owned anything more than the clothes on their backs, of the nights they worried about rent, of the pride they never got to taste. That moment was his redemption for them, for himself, for his daughter. And at first, it seemed worth it. Her joy on move-in day made every sleepless night disappear. Watching her twirl in the living room, he thought he'd won. The cracks only appeared later, and when they did, they struck at the very core of what he believed. For every jab she made about the furniture, he remembered the overtime shift that paid for it. For every laugh she threw at his lack of taste, he remembered the weeks he skipped meals so she'd never go hungry. For every insult about the house being embarrassing, he remembered the shame he carried as a boy, inviting no one home because he had nothing to show. Her words weren't just complaints about style, they were daggers aimed at his very soul. The house was more than a backdrop, it was his legacy, the proof that he had kept his promise. And now that legacy was being dismantled, piece by piece, by the very person it was built for. Still, beneath the heartbreak, something stirred. An ember of strength that had carried him through decades of hardship began to glow again. He had faced ridicule before, endured bosses who barked orders, endured nights when his body screamed for rest, but his will pushed him forward. He had fought for survival when the odds were stacked against him. And now, standing in the home that represented his entire life's work, he felt that same resilience tightening in his chest. He would not be mocked into silence. He would not let sacrifice be reduced to a punchline about aesthetics. He had built this house, and with it, he had built the right to demand respect. And so when she dismissed his sacrifice with one cruel sentence, it wasn't just disrespect, it was war. The silence after her last insult hung in the air like smoke. Her friends shifted in their seats, the weight of her words finally settling on the room. And then, without raising his voice, without breaking stride, the father turned away. He walked past her, past the laughter that had once been hers alone, past the walls he had painted with his own hands. His steps were steady, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The screen of a phone lit up, capturing his movements. Another followed. Within seconds, 3, 4, 5 cameras were pointed at him. The daughter smirked at first, thinking he was retreating in embarrassment. She didn't yet understand. Outside, the air was sharp with evening chill. He moved across the lawn, his boots crunching on the gravel, the hammer clutched in his grip. From the trunk of his old truck, he pulled it out, the wooden post, the bold whiteboard, the red letters that could not be ignored. Asterisk asterisk for sale. Asterisk asterisk. The hammer rose, then fell. Metal rang against wood, a sound that carried farther than his voice ever could. Again, again. Each strike was final, unrelenting. Neighbors turned their heads, curtains parted, a small crowd began to gather. Within minutes, the quiet street was alive with whispers and recording phones. They didn't know the full story, but they knew they were watching something unforgettable. The daughter stormed onto the porch, her voice breaking into shrieks. "Dad, what are you doing? Stop it. You can't just, this is insane." Her words were high-pitched, panicked, but he didn't respond. He kept hammering until the sign stood tall and unwavering in the front yard. Only then did he straighten his back, rest the hammer against his side, and turn to face her. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but every word landed with the weight of years. "If it's not good enough for you," he said, eyes locked on hers, "maybe it's good enough for someone else." The crowd gasped. Phones captured the line, replayed in real time across platforms where comments flooded in. Asterisk, did you hear that? Asterisk asterisk iconic dot asterisk asterisk, that's how you shut down entitlement. Asterisk, within minutes, The phrase was immortalized, destined to be clipped, memed, shared a million times over. The daughter's face collapsed, her arrogance cracking under the pressure of reality. Her aesthetic, the carefully curated life she had built online, was unraveling right in front of strangers. She covered her face with trembling hands, shouting, "You can't! This is my house! You're humiliating me!" But the more she screamed, the clearer the contrast became. She was frantic, chaotic, unraveling under the weight of exposure. He was steady, composed, immovable. Hero and villain, side by side, one rising, the other crumbling. But the story did more than entertain. It ignited a conversation. Across dinner tables, in classrooms, on podcasts, people asked, what does gratitude look like in a generation obsessed with aesthetics? How much should parents sacrifice before they demand respect? The hammer and sign became symbols of a larger cultural reckoning. Commentators noted the generational divide with urgency. We live in a time, one columnist wrote, where likes can outweigh legacy. This father reminded us that no filter can replace respect. Others framed it as a lesson in parenting, a reminder that boundaries were as important as gifts. For the father, none of this was planned. He hadn't sought fame or validation, yet his act of defiance had tapped into something universal. Every parent who had ever felt invisible, every worker who had ever sacrificed in silence, every immigrant who had built a life, brick by brick, all of them saw themselves in his hammer strike. And so, as his daughter watched her aesthetic empire crumble, the world rallied behind him. The internet had crowned its victor. Memes glorified his revenge. Hashtags turned his words into gospel, and conversations spread like ripples on water. But beyond the chaos and viral fame, a deeper lesson lingered, one that goes beyond likes and headlines. She said, "I ruined her aesthetic." But the truth is, gratitude never goes out of style. That single line captures everything this story has laid bare. It isn't about walls, paint, or curated perfection. It's about what we choose to honor, the sacrifices that build us, the dignity that sustains us, the respect that keeps families whole. The father's story is not just his own, it is the story of countless parents, immigrants, and quiet heroes who give everything, only to be told it isn't enough. His answer, calm and unforgettable, reminded us that appearances fade, but values endure. That respect is not a luxury, it's a duty. So let this be more than just a viral moment. Let it be a mirror. Ask yourself, what do you value more, the aesthetic or the sacrifice that made it possible? The truth is clear. Dignity must always triumph over entitlement. Gratitude must always outweigh vanity. And now, I want to leave you with this. If you believe dignity matters more than aesthetics, share this story, pass it on, subscribe, and join a community that refuses to let arrogance drown out truth. Because together, we can lift up the voices of those who build, who sacrifice, and who deserve respect. This is more than content. It's a movement, one that says gratitude never goes out of style.